something happen, and then it'll start. Things could shake up from there. I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
Hey, did we ever get an ETA on the Fauci files or the speakers?
Fauci files, no, nothing yet. No date for that. We were expecting it this week, but it's looking like there's more drops outside of the Fauci files. I still don't know what this one is about. I haven't had time to read it just as we organize the room.
How many people do we have in here so far? 3,000. Okay, 3,000 people are waiting for us to have a conversation.
Start entertaining us, Ian. Go.
Are there any drops
Yes,
yet?
yes,
Or
there are
what?
drops. Like, look at my timeline.
Oh, I tried not to look.
It's pinned.
It's
It's
very
also pinned above. It's also pinned above.
okay. I'm just scared to see Ian's cat.
Okay, I'll start reading it out.
Your cat lost by a landslide to my sister's dog, by the way, in the Elon CEO competition. Just saying.
Yeah, I know. So.
Well, you want to start by reading out what we have?
Yes. 1 second. Okay, Twitter Files Part 8. How Twitter quietly aided the Pentagon's covert online PSYOP campaign. That's the title. It goes. Despite promises to shut down covert state-run propaganda networks, Twitter docs show that the social media giant directly assisted the U.S. military's influence operations. Number 2. Twitter has claimed for years that they make concerted efforts to detect and thwart government-backed platform manipulation. Here's Twitter testifying to Congress about its pledge to rapidly identify and shut down all state-backed covert information operations and deceptive propaganda. I will read that. It's quite lengthy, but I'll read it just to get people up to speed. This is what they said to Congress. Combating attempts to interfere in conversation on Twitter remains a top priority for the company, and we continue to invest heavily in our detection, disruption, and transparency efforts related to state-backed information operations. Our goal is to remove bad faith actors and advance public understanding of these critical topics. Twitter defines state-backed information operations as coordinated platform manipulation efforts that can be attributed to a high degree of confidence to state-affiliated actors. State-backed information operations are typically associated with misleading, deceptive, and spammy behavior. These behaviors differentiate coordinated manipulative behavior from legitimate speech on behalf of individuals and political parties. Whenever we identify inauthentic activity on Twitter that meets our definition of an information operation, and we are able to confidently attribute to actors associated with a government, we share comprehensive data about this activity. So that's what they told Congress. Now, number 3. But behind the scenes, Twitter gave approval and special protection to the U.S. military's online psychological influence ops. That's PSYOPs, okay? Despite knowledge that Pentagon propaganda accounts used covert identities, Twitter did not suspend many for around 2 years or more. Some remain active. In 2017, a U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, officials sent Twitter a list of 52 Arab language accounts. Quote, we used to amplify certain messages, end quote. The official asked for priority service for 6 accounts, verification for 1, and a whitelist abilities for the others. And here's the email that was sent from Nathaniel B. Kaler. He is from CENTCOM. He says, thanks. Blanked out. Sure is tough to do web ops when you can't tweet. I've attached a list. Excuse me. I need to sneeze. If attached to list, the first 6 on this list are priority accounts. Ideally, we could have them verified with a blue check mark and whitelisted if there is such a thing. One of them, at Yemen Current, is currently not indexing. At justice_AR currently has a request for verification, but haven't heard anything. The rest are accounts we use to amplify certain messages. Ideally, they could be whitelisted as well. Again, if it's too big of a risk, the first 6 are the priority. If you need any sort of paperwork or verification from our office or SOCOM, please just let me know. Also, our SOCOM guys mentioned that they'd love to be able to come and meet up for a face-to-face talk if you think the right Twitter folks would be up for it. Number 5. The same day CENTCOM sent the list, Twitter officials used a tool to grant a special whitelist tag that essentially provides verification status to the accounts without the blue check mark, meaning that they are exempt from spam or abuse flags and are more visible and likely to trend on hashtags. Number 6. The CENTCOM accounts on this list tweeted frequently about U.S. military priorities in the Middle East, including promoting anti-Iran messages, promotion of the Saudi Arabia-U.S.-backed war in Yemen, and, quote, accurate, end quote, U.S. drone strikes that claim to only hit terrorists. Now, we know for a fact that the U.S. drone strikes did not just hit terrorists. They also hit a lot of civilians, weddings, schools, hospitals. But that stuff would, of course, be de-amplified. They only promoted the good stuff, right? So if they bomb a hospital, well, maybe there's terrorists there. And that's the kind of messaging that they put out.
The famous example here is, of course, where Biden approved a drone strike on an alleged terrorist and killed a family of 7 with 6 kids in Afghanistan. There was quite a big story. So, yes, these things happen all the time where they just kill the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
Collateral damage.
So that's where we are at so far. That was number 6. There was more. More coming. Yes, a few more here now. CENTCOM then shifted strategies and deleted disclosures of ties to Twitter accounts. The bios of accounts changed to seemingly organic profiles. So people had no idea these were government affiliated. One bio read Euphrates Pulse. Another used an apparent deepfake profile picture and claimed to be a source of Iraqi opinion. So yeah, they're not real. They're fake accounts, right? And number 8, one Twitter official who spoke to me, to Li Fang, said that he feels deceived by the covert shift. Still, many emails from throughout 2020 show that high-level Twitter executives were well aware of the Department of Defense's vast networks of fake accounts and covert propaganda and did not suspend the accounts. This so far is in from 2017 to 2020. Very, very interesting stuff.
That is some juicy stuff.
Yep.
Definitely very interesting, because what this means is Twitter is being used as a propaganda tool by the US government against other nations that they are in conflict with. So they are creating tweets and stories that favor the actions of the US government and put other governments in a bad light. And that Twitter is involved in something like that, that's very concerning, or was involved. Obviously not anymore, but it was.
Yeah, I agree. Like I don't like this at all. I think that it shows that Twitter was working with the military to spread pro-U.S. propaganda. I mean, they're a U.S. company. The military is working with them. It depends where your morals are, I guess. There's nothing probably illegal about this, but it's definitely
number 9.
doesn't
No, it's
smell.
illegal.
It doesn't smell too great to me.
It's pretty
What
illegal.
are the laws that were broken here? Do you know?
I would guess Rico.
Go into that later.
There's no Rico. Pentagon.
Number nine.
Number 9. Yep. For example, Twitter lawyer Jim Baker mused in a July 2020 email about an upcoming Department of Defense meeting that the Pentagon used, quote, poor tradecraft, end quote, in setting up its network, and we're seeking strategies for not exposing the accounts that are, quote, linked to each other or to the DoD or to the U.S. government. So they knew this stuff was not kosher, right? It's not above board. This stuff is covert operations that they were using to push disinformation on American civilians, on American citizens, to make them more open to the idea of going to war, or the idea of bombing Yemen with the help of the Saudis, or to go to war with Syria, right? Sending troops to Syria. Well, what does that do? Well, a lot of American soldiers die, first of all. You're putting them in harm's way, and they're promoting this through by manipulating or nudging the public. So no, I don't think this is okay. This is definitely not okay.
Yeah, and they're creating fake accounts that don't even show at all that this is the U.S. government behind it and that they are writing these tweets. So they do it in Arab languages. They promote topics that are important to them. But those people who are reading that stuff, and it's being put in front of their noses by Twitter promoting this as content that they put it on the timeline of every user in that country, so it gets amplified, and no one even knows that this is U.S. propaganda.
It'll be interesting to know how
Right.
much the president knew about this at the time. Trump, of course.
Yeah, Trump was the president at the time. I don't know.
I mean, if I can jump in, the propaganda laws were changed in 2013 to allow for dissemination to the U.S. domestic population. People may recall in 2021, Newsweek did a article specifically stating how the Pentagon and DoD had a private army of approximately 65,000, the bulk of which into online messaging. And if you look, this isn't limited to Twitter. Last month in November, Facebook came out and they flagged a number of DoD accounts that were engaged in this propaganda. You can look it up. That occurred, I believe, on November 23rd. That broke news.
So I just want to comment on the Yemen civil war. This is a two-tier proxy war between the Russians, Iranians on one side supporting the rebels, and then the Saudi-backed or government and the Americans and the British. Sorry, am I too noisy? I was muted.
It's fine now.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say that the Americans and the British have been providing a huge array of arms to the Yemen government for years, and so this is a huge problem that the Americans are doing by basically sustaining a conflict in a region of the world that is already plagued by instability. So I'm not surprised nor impressed by these findings of the Twitter spaces. So I'm in full agreement with you guys on that.
They played both sides. They supplied both sides of the war. That's what they do. And it's in the U.S. government's interest to promote both sides of the war, to
I
prolong
have
it.
a question for you, Ian, before we go to Tom, Dallas, and fried chicken. So based on the files so far, I'm just going reading them now because I was just organizing the room. Based on the drop so far, they've allowed the U.S. government to use fake accounts to support whatever agenda they want to support, or the U.S. military or whatever department you mentioned, Department of Defense. So that's what we know so far, correct?
Yes, and number 10 just
Okay, go
dropped.
ahead.
So I'll read that. Stacey Cardill, another Twitter lawyer, replied to the Pentagon and wanted a SCIF. Now, if you don't know what a SCIF is basically a private room that is, radio proof, surveillance proof, right? Surveillance proof room. That's a thing. You can go in there and you have like secret discussions. So Stacey Cardill, another Twitter attorney lawyer, replied to the Pentagon, replied that the Pentagon wanted a SCIF and may want to retroactively classify its social media activities, quote, to obfuscate their activity in this space, and that this may represent an overclassification to avoid embarrassment. So they knew what they were doing was really, I don't know, embarrassing, right? So here's an email that Stacey Cardill wrote to Jim Baker and Angela Scherer. Jim, Angela, and I discussed attendance at this classified briefing. I heard from Facebook that they are securing SCIFs in DC and San Francisco for a meeting possibly on Friday. I have some significant concerns that the motivations for classifications are slightly different than the ones you outlined in the email below. I think it is possible the DoD is using retroactive classification to obfuscate their activity in this space, and that this may represent an overclassification to avoid embarrassment. Angela and I think you would be more effective in this meeting than me, as the officials will view you more seriously. Thoughts on this? And then in parentheses, it says, separate and apart from the merits, I have some concerns with attending due to COVID exposure and my 2 immunocompromised family members. Huh. The priorities, my God. These people are embarrassing.
Tom, Catherine?
There are a few things here. The Pentagon is going to say, and I probably correctly, that this does not violate the law in the sense that it's propaganda not directed at Americans, although it does use an American-based platform, but it's directed abroad in the foreign operation areas in which they're conducting activity, and because the Defense Department regulations or the law prohibits spending money on propaganda directed at U.S. citizens internally. So that's going to be their out. The second question. Now, the second question: is this a good idea? Was it likely to be uncovered? And what would be the result if it's uncovered? And when intelligence operations engage in this type of activity, where they use civilian entities such as Twitter or journalists or such, either wittingly or unwittingly, to conduct intelligence operations, in this case, intelligence information operations, you risk providing our other countries, the governments of other countries, an excuse to restrict the reach of the entity, in this case, Twitter. The document suggests that Facebook and other entities were involved as well in this information operation. So what's here isn't necessarily illegal, but it does have a Keystone Cops type of scandal associated with it, given the likely blowback and blow up of in terms of the reaction to this.
So, Tom, in your analysis of this in the first part, you are saying that the U.S. government is not allowed to use tools like this propaganda in the U.S. On Twitter, there are no borders. You don't know who's going to read this stuff, even if it's written in Arabic. There are people living in the United States that understand Arabic. They're U.S. citizens. How can they say that they have only targeted people outside of the U.S.? I mean, there's no legitimate way for them to use that justification.
Well, that's and now I raise that as an argument they will make. I'm not suggesting it would be persuasive to everyone, if anyone. But not knowing Arabic, I would suggest, based on a review of the documents, that this clearly geared towards outside foreign populations. And the government, by government, Kim, it's there's different restrictions for different agencies. The State Department has the Voice of America, or there are entities like that obviously are in some form government propaganda that U.S. Audiences can see, and it's directed at, and that's not necessarily illegal. But the Pentagon or the Defense Department is really strictly prohibited from doing that type of activity. So folks are going to look at this and analyze it, Kim, as you suggest. Is it really just geared exclusively at foreigners? Is it reasonable to put this type of material on a U.S. company platform and pretend it's not directed at U.S. citizens? I don't know. That to me is going to be part of any subsequent investigation and analysis of it.
Yeah, that argument is just simply impossible because there's no no borders on Twitter. Like, anything that is on Twitter is accessible to everybody.
But I think
okay, there's two more drops. Yeah, it's two more drops. Yep. Number 11. In several other 2020 emails, high-level Twitter executives and lawyers discussed the covert network and even recirculated the 2017 list from CENTCOM and shared another list of 157 undisclosed Pentagon accounts, again, mostly focused on Middle East or military issues. Middle East military issues, not or. And that's 157 undisclosed accounts, in addition to the ones we already listed, okay? Number 12, in a May 2020 email, Twitter's Lisa Roman emailed the DoD with two lists. One list was accounts previously provided to us, and another list Twitter detected. The accounts tweeted in Russian and Arabic on U.S. military issues in Syria, ISIS, and many also did not disclose their ties to the Pentagon. Here's the email that she wrote to the DoD. Bill, thank you again for your time yesterday. As discussed, attached is a spreadsheet of accounts we described on our call. The first tab lists those accounts previously provided to us, and the second, associated accounts that Twitter has discovered. Please note that the second tab was not intended to be an exhaustive list, and if DoD is aware of additional associated accounts which may violate our rules, those should be included in the scope of our request. I would be grateful if you would confirm receipt and that you are able to access this spreadsheet without issue. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding this information. Best, Lisa. Yeah, it's a list of all
And then there's
the accounts number 13 and 14. Okay, number 13. Many of these secretive U.S. military propaganda accounts, despite detection by Twitter as late as 2020, but potentially earlier, continued tweeting throughout the year. Some not suspended until May 2022 or later, according to records I reviewed. In August 2022, a Stanford Internet Observatory report exposed a U.S. military covert propaganda network on Facebook, Telegram, and Twitter, and other apps using fake news portals and deepfake images and memes against U.S. foreign adversaries. And there is a link to that, and I will just add that in the top there so you can see it's a thing from Graphica.
So my question here goes back to you, Tom. Like, if the U.S. wanted to engage in those efforts to influence, because when I say our, United States enemies are using those same methods. So if the U.S. wants to have that war for the hearts and minds of other countries, they cannot really, and Kim's concern of like, okay, but people on U.S. soil will still see that information. True, but how else could they do it? How else could they? If they're posting the content in Arabic, targeted for that audience, because obviously if it's targeted for the US audience, it'll be in English, then at least they obviously we need more information, but they're at least their efforts are aimed at other countries. Would you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a correct analysis. I may be an outlier here, but I believe, if we're engaged in, especially military operations abroad, the Pentagon has a positive moral and military obligation to engage in propaganda efforts to support the war effort in places abroad. Now, that all being said, that's not what the U.S. official government position is on information operations using these big tech platforms. When directed against the United States, it is the gravest mortal sin to have these information operations directed at the United States. It's as the hypocrisy of these big tech platforms is shown, is that they were, at least in the case of Twitter, aware of a major information operation using fake mass accounts in a way that would have triggered not only the shutdown of similar operations from other countries, right, but the targeting of Americans for even unknowingly participating in that. And so there's got to be some accountability for this, but this is what happens when politics takes precedence over national security. And, everyone knows the Russians are trying to influence America and the Chinese and such. And rather than being forthright about that and sophisticated in their analysis about what they're doing and what the likelihood of the impact is going to be, it was Trump is a traitor. And so all normal analysis was thrown out the window. And now they're going to be hoisted their own petard because they pretended that this was the worst possible thing a national government could do.
There's going to be probably more drops. Ian is about to jump in. It'll be interesting to see with future drops if there are a few more. I was going to say, before you read them, I was going to say it'll be interesting to see in those drops if there are efforts to influence the American opinion, the US opinion. So that'll change things, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So you should check the Graphica report that I put up there in the top. That should, you should read it. Anyway, number 15. The U.S. propaganda network relentlessly pushed narratives against Russia, China, and other foreign countries. They accused Iran of threatening Iraq's water security and flooding the country with crystal meth, and of harvesting the organs of Afghan refugees. Now, none of these things are true, right? They never harvested Afghan refugees' organs. They never flooded the country with crystal meth of Iraq. That's just all nonsense that was put out by the DoD. Okay. And unfortunately, this stuff is what makes into the public's, understanding of what's happening in that situation, makes them more supportive of a war against Iran or Russia or China, right? This is just, yeah. Anyway, number 16. The Stanford report did not identify all of the accounts in the network, but they did name. But the one they did name was the exact same Twitter account CENTCOM asked for a whitelist privilege in 2017 in an email. I verified this through Twitter's internal tools. The account used the account used an AI-created deepfake image. So the person in the profile picture is not a real person, right? The profile used by Facebook
it looks so
page
real though.
discover.
If anyone checks it, check it out. Check tweet number 16. It looks pretty damn real.
It looks real, but you can tell. You can usually tell that this is fake because, look at his shirt. It doesn't add up. The background is twisted, and his face is in the exact same, I want to say, shape or expression as all these other deepfake images. It's pretty easy to tell. But they were using this image to push this stuff. So that's number 16.
Oh, there's nothing after it. Go ahead.
He's the ghost of Kiev, just so you know.
Yeah, I think go ahead. Fried chicken, then Catherine. Go ahead, fried chicken.
I think it's pretty clear that the United States government and government agencies have committed atrocious moral wrongdoings to the citizens of America. My question, and I feel like Tom and Prodigal could probably speak to this a little bit, is where does the line get crossed from nefarious wrongdoings to legality? And where does the legality stick? And where does it stick? And then if there are legal crimes that were committed against American citizens, who is to then go after that case? Then we're asking the government to govern itself and reprimand itself. Does this end with does court get held in the streets by the citizens with pitchforks at the end of all this? That's something I've been thinking about quite a bit, and I feel like one of you two could probably answer well to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in quickly. I mean, the problem is, I pinned the Washington Post article up there from September, where the Pentagon basically admits to what's in the Twitter files. But the issue is that the Pentagon is going to investigate itself. So to me, it's always a problem when the entity who violated its own internal rules or arguably laws is the one that's going to do this investigation.
There's no other entity that could do the investigation.
Well, there hasn't been anybody pushing for it. I mean, they put this out, in my opinion, to do a whitewash, to cover it up, similar to what was done with the Mueller Russiagate hoax and the IG Horowitz report. They classified good, substantial portions of their investigations that would have shed light on the DNC's.
I have another question for you, Prodigal. Like where, and it goes back to my last question, like where do you draw the line between, the battle for the hearts and mind of your enemy versus propaganda against your own citizens?
I mean, I agree with Tom's position on this in regards to if it's foreign elements. I mean, there's clear geopolitical tensions and risks going on between the Sino-Russian Iranian alliance and Western interests. So I can understand if it's abroad, but for me, I'm curious if these operations were used domestically, specifically for COVID or for censorship of election integrity issues. I have no issue fighting fire with fire against autocratic and, in my opinion, brutally repressive regimes. My only issue would be is if this machine, even.
I dropped out, Prodigal. Ian, any new jobs?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow, I'm gonna continue Prodigal's thought. This technique was used against Americans by the FBI and DHS, in the sense that they were, as Kim quite eloquently yesterday described, prepping and conditioning Twitter, Facebook, and these other companies to react in the way that they were trained to react in response to stories that they knew were true, but they fooled them into thinking, or in the case of this Hunter Biden story, to be clear, they weren't fooled. They knew there was no foreign element, but they all had the language and the way of thinking as a result of this propaganda information psyop against American citizens. And it was targeted specifically.
You've cut out, Tom. Tom's cut out. I can't hear him. Ian, do you want to go through 17? Just came in.
Yep, I can do that.
I think it's dropping them out. I think
Scrolling
Tom's
down.
going to get dropped out. A similar glitch to what we had before, because Portugal seems to have dropped out. Yeah,
Maybe. Yeah, number 17. In subsequent reporting, Twitter was cast as an unbiased hero for removing a network of fake user accounts promoting pro-Western policy positions. Media covering the story described Twitter as evenly applying its policies and proactive in suspending the Department of Defense network. 18. The reality is much more murky. Twitter actively assisted CENTCOM's network going back to 2017 and as late as 2020 knew these accounts were covert or designed to deceive, to manipulate the discourse, a violation of Twitter's policies and promises. They waited years to suspend. That's where we're at so far.
Okay, let me bring up Catherine as well, dropped out. So we're still having the same glitches before.
Hey, Mario.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Mario, do you mind if I chime in?
Sure, bro.
That's cool. So I had a couple of questions, and I think Tom maybe would be interesting to answer this, or Ian. So the challenging part of this is like, so that it's like they say, hey, we're fighting fire with fire, but it's like, wasn't an option also to?
We're having the issue again, Ian, where just speakers drop out. Yeah, speakers just drop out.
Everyone cutting out, and I don't think this is a coincidence.
No. It is not. It is, guys. It happened before, Kim. That's the third time it happens to the space.
It does happen.
Yeah. So I but
Twitter files specifically, but yeah, no coincidence.
Yeah, I don't have other spaces where this is happening, so it always only happens in Twitter files.
I don't know.
Just complain at Elon. Tell him to look into it.
Paranoia runs wild.
Yeah, no, like the guy, the guy
tell him that this stuff is dropping.
He did. It dropped out. It dropped, guys. I said, hold on. Last time it dropped out was when I messaged him and he wanted to jump in yesterday, or after the World Cup, and we weren't covering Twitter files then, were we, Ian? Were we? What were we covering when the World Cup?
No, we were not.
Yeah. But either way, I think it just doesn't matter. We've had a lot of glitches, different ones. But just back to the discussion, since us three, we know we could speak. Hopefully it works for other speakers. But like Ian, a question to you is, what are your thoughts? And I'd like to get Kim's thoughts as well. Because would you agree, like, I'm not saying ethically, it's a whole different discussion, and these drops did catch me by surprise. But I'm not sure how surprised I should be, because wars or battling for the hearts and minds of your enemy is nothing new. And that was like
why are they the enemy?
They consider them the enemy. So what you define as an enemy. So
why though? They're not doing anything to America. America just wants to perpetuate the military-industrial complex to make money. They're not the enemy. They should not be the enemy of the American people. It's the same thing with Russia. Russia is not America's enemy. No person in Russia hates Americans, right? I'm sure there's some hardcore crazy people who do, but the vast majority of Russians don't hate America. And for some reason, the US government is trying to make Americans hate everybody else, to support their wars in these countries, right? To support the war in Ukraine, to say, hey, let's give a shit ton of money to our friends in Ukraine, and fight the Russians. But it's like, who are you benefiting? I mean, who's benefiting from this? There is a saying, and I believe it's in Latin, but basically it's who stands to gain from this and who stands to lose from this. The idea is that the military-industrial complex stands to gain from all of this. The American people lose everything because all their taxpayer dollars go to funding these dumb wars that America should not be involved in. Like, the war in Ukraine could have ended months ago because Zelensky refuses to sit down at the table with Putin because Biden tells him, don't do that. We're not going to give you any more money if you do that. So of course he doesn't do that. He's got, it's so easy for America, which is like an entire ocean away from Europe, to tell Zelensky to go do something. And even Europe is telling Zelensky, hey, it's time to sit down now. It's enough. Because guess what? Everybody in Europe is being affected by this.
Maybe not
the energy
attack
crisis
the
is
guy
through the
whose
roof.
country is being attacked, Ian.
It doesn't matter. Like that's besides the point.
I think that's
you can't undo that, right? Like the point is they need to sit down and talk about it. And Europe
yeah,
is
but
being
you
heavily
talk about
affected by
what?
this.
Giving Putin something that he wants, and
No, like a
because he
country.
invaded your country.
It's not about giving Putin what he wants. Like, you have to look at the history
Well, that's what
of
any
Ukraine.
sit-down would be
This is
about.
not just some
Putin would have a
random ass
demand, and
invasion
he'd
that just
expect
happened
Zelensky
overnight.
to give him something.
This began in 2014 when Ukraine repeatedly violated the Minsk protocols, right? And attacked
Oh,
a
This
I'm
started
sorry.
long
Didn't
before
Russia
2014.
sign a contract saying that they're not going
You guys
to?
have a mute button. I suggest using it when you're speaking, because when two people are speaking at the same time, I cannot hear a word either of you are saying.
I'm just speaking over people because they're
No, you were
spouting nonsense
speaking
about
and other
Ukraine.
people are.
Yeah, so
But the point is, we're losing the point here, right? The point is that America has no business doing this stuff overseas. Like, it's not America's job to be the world police.
I think that you've made a few points here. Some I agree with. Others I would kind of point towards, like, for example, using the battle for the minds of let's say people in Russia, people in China, people in Yemen, people in Saudi. They're doing it to Americans as well. Like, I've spent a lot of time in China and Russia as well. Like, my partner lived in Russia and she's Ukrainian and she has a lot of Russian friends. And would you agree that Russia and China?
Did you drop out?
He did Mario.
Yeah, it's like he can't unmute. Oh
He's
man, what the
so
hell?
bugged. This is insane.
Yeah, this is pretty bad.
I got kicked 3 times now. I closed the.
Yeah, I didn't kick you out. Nobody here kicked you out. Yeah, it's like it's messing up. So Kim, why don't? Oh no, he's gone again.